Dear friends, I am Dr. Jai Singh, Associate Professor, Department of English Literature, the EFL University, Hyderabad. Friends, today I will give my first lecture on Paradise Lost by John Milton. The main objective of this lecture are to understand the age in which John Milton was born and brought up, to get a brief idea of all major works of John Milton, to get acquainted with the text of Paradise Lost through a summary of the text. First, I will give an introduction to John Milton's major works and his life. John Milton is a major name in the field of English literature, especially epic literature, because he is the writer of the most important epic, Paradise Lost, in English language. He was born on 9th December 1608 and died on 8th November 1674. He was a poet, a philosopher, a political activist, a pamphlet writer, and many other things rolled into one. John Milton was one of the greatest poets of England and is placed alongside Shakespeare in the hierarchy of English poets. John Milton's work can be broadly divided into three periods. The first period extends from 1629 to 1640. The first period belongs to his university period and study at Horton. While still at college, he composed poems of remarkable excellence. Some of the poems composed by him during this period are Ode on the Morning of Christ's Nativity, El Allegro, El Penseroso, and Camus. The Ode on the Morning of Christ's Nativity is influenced by the traditions set by the metaphysical poets. It is regarded as one of the most remarkable ode in English language. This poem also bears the influence of Spenser. This ode has sublimity of thought and splendor of imagery. This poem displays the elevation of thought and grandeur of conception, along with conscious effort to reach the highest standard of lyrical excellence. At the level of rhetoric and prosody, this poem is nearer to metaphysical poetry, as evident from conceits and alliterative effects. Two more short poems of John Milton from this period are On Shakespeare and On Arriving at the Age of 23. Two major long poems during the Horton period by John Milton are composed, El Allegro and El Penseroso. These poems are composed in octosyllabic couplets and they deal with the respective experiences of a contemplating man. These poems are full of scholarly fancy and skillful poetical phrasing. In El Allegro, John Milton presents the life of a delighted man and proves to be perfect Renaissance artist. This poem is an invocation to the goddess Mirth to allow the poet to live with her amongst the delights of rustic scenes. The second poem, El Penseroso, represents the contemplating man, and it is an invocation to the goddess Melancholy to bring peace and quiet, leisure and contemplation. In this poem, he describes the pleasure of the studious and meditative life, of tragedy, epic poetry, and music. This poem is an example of Puritan outlook towards life. These two poems of this period, Arcade and Camus, are in masque form. Arcades was written to celebrate the character of Alice Spencer, widow of Ferdinand Stanley, 5th Earl of Derby, on her 75th birthday. The masque celebrates Alice Spencer as queen of metaphorical Arcadia. This poem draws on pastoral elements. This poem compares her with the classical female divinities such as Sibyl and Latonia, who have established divine families. Camus was written at the request of John Milton's friend Henry Lewes, a musician, who supplied the music and played the part of the attendant spirit when the masque was presented in 1634. The plot of Camus is simple and very effective, containing enough of the fantastic mythological element for scenic display. However, leaving the main interest of the poem to center upon the rich, serious poetry. In this poem, a brother and sister lose their path by night in the forest, become separated. The girl is taken captive by Camus and is led to the place where he dwells, surrounded by strange, half bestial creatures whom he has transformed. He attempts to transform her, however, she resists and is rescued by her brothers and an attendant spirit, who takes the guise of their father's shepherd. Camus is a remarkable poem which displays John Milton's high poetical quality. His another poem, Lycidas, is a pastoral elegy upon the death of his friend Edward King. John Milton imitated the classical model of Theocritus and Bion. Though it is an elegy on his friend Edward King, yet Edward King is not its real subject. This poem foregrounds the uncertainty and torment caused in the poet's mind by his realization that death might forestall the achievements of that fame that he wanted to achieve. This poem displays different colors and moods, such as interplay of doubt, fear, anger, and finally, a peaceful reliance on the belief that true fame rests on God and is to be found in heaven. In this poem, John Milton foregrounds the corruption prevalent in the Roman Catholic Church. Therefore, the poem of mourning becomes the poem of forceful satire and a note on personal ambitions. In this way, the poem rises to a pitch of intensity which makes the lament for his friend almost pale in contrast. Therefore, the poem rises above the conventions of classical legends and pastoral elegies. This poem is reckoned among the highest of John Milton's achievement and offers something quite new in English poetry. As far as form and structure are concerned, this poem is a pastoral elegy. However, thematically, it is an evidence of John Milton's poetic power that brings from intractable material the very essence of poetry. This poem by a refined humanist is an example of supreme perfection of style, imagery and versification. Only a few poems in English language exhibit more exquisite harmony and variety of numbers. The second period of John Milton's literary career extends from 1649 to 1663, and this period is known for his political works, as he wrote many prose pamphlets, most importantly Areopagitica, which is published in 1944, which advocates for the liberty of unlicensed printing and is addressed to the Parliament of England. This pamphlet is among history's most influential and impassioned philosophical defenses of the right to freedom of speech and expression. This pamphlet was published when the English Civil War was looming large. Milton was not a member of Parliament, and it is not an oral speech to that assembly. Instead, it was distributed as a pamphlet, thus defying the same publication censorship which he argued against. As a radical, John Milton had supported the Presbyterians in Parliament and would later work as a civil servant for the new republic. But in his work, he argued forcefully against Parliament's 1643 ordinance for the regulating of printing, also known as the Licensing Order of 1643, in which Parliament required authors to have a license approved by the government before their work could be published. Areopagitica is full of biblical and classical references which Milton uses to strengthen his argument. This is particularly fitting because it was being addressed to the Calvinist Presbyterians who composed the Parliament at that time. However, even during this period, John Milton could write a little bit of poetry, mostly sonnets. The sonnets written during this period have varied interest. Though they are few in number, they are of great interest because they mark a return from Shakespearean sonnet to Petrarchan sonnet. On his blindness and on the late massacre in Piedmont are most important sonnets written by John Milton in this period. The subject matter of sonnets written by him during this period revolves around the controversial themes regarding women, political figures and his own life. The third period of John Milton's literary career extends from 1663 to 1664, and it is considered the most productive and most important period in his life, because in this period he wrote the most important poem of all times in English language, that is Paradise Lost, the most important epic in all languages along with Paradise Regained, a much less successful epic, and then a play Samson Agonistes. The most important work of this period is Paradise Lost. It is an epic in blank verse. It was initially consist of 10 books. Later on, book 7 and book 10 are divided into 2 parts each, and the number of books increased to 12. The Paradise Lost narrates the biblical story of the fall of man caused by the temptation of Eve by the fallen angels, Satan, and then Adam is persuaded by Eve that leads to expulsion of both of them from the Garden of Eden. John Milton started his work on Paradise Lost in 1658 and completed it in 1663. Though he wrote this epic in his old age, there are references to his young days. This epic has 2 stories, and both stories overlap each other, and leading characters are expelled from heaven and Eden respectively. In the first story, Satan along with his supporting angels fights against God, and in this fight they are defeated by God. After the defeat, they are expelled from heaven and thrown into hell. When the poem opens, all fallen angels are in hell, and Satan reorganizes the fallen angels. They have a very big assembly wherein they decide to continue their fight against God. However, before they need to build a city for themselves. To build a beautiful city in hell, all fallen angels are assigned different responsibilities and duties according to their capacity. Some of the powerful fallen angels present in the meeting are Mammon, Beelzebub, Belial and Moloch. As the epic progresses, the second story, that is the story of Adam and Eve, is also introduced through the information received by Satan. He comes to know that God has created a new place called earth for his most favorite creation, mankind. Now, Satan decides to corrupt this favorite creation of God, but for that he must travel from hell to earth, which is not an easy task, because they are separated by abyss and there are so many other dangers as well. Satan takes up the risk. He gets out of the hell, whose gate is guarded by death. He reaches the new world created by God and cheats Eve and persuades her to violate the rules created by God and causes their fall. After Paradise Lost, he tried his hands at another epic, Paradise Regained, which was published in 1671, which is much inferior in theme and structure. Its theme is taken from the first verses of the 4th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel. This epic opens with the journey of Christ into the wilderness after his baptism, and its 4 books describe the temptation of Christ by Satan and the victory of Christ as Redeemer of humanity. This poem differs from Paradise Lost because it is structured as dialogue in epic rather than an epic. Therefore, the journey from Paradise Lost to Paradise Regained is a downward journey from brilliancy achieved by the poet in the earlier work. This poem is full of didactic remarks put in the mouth of Christ, whom Milton calls the Son of God. Puritanism reaches the climax in this poem, and the classical gods and orators are relegated to subordinate positions. In short, Paradise Regained is inferior to Paradise Lost in both imagination and dynamic theme. It lacks the vigor, the brilliance, and the imaginative greatness of Paradise Lost. It is shorter and poorer than Paradise Lost. It lacks the exalted imagination, the adornment, and the ornate rhymes in the earlier poem. Along with the epic poetry, John Milton tried his hands at the dramatic poetry as well and published Samson Agonistes, a tragic closet drama. It was published along with Paradise Regained in 1671. This work is dramatic in form and tone. The theme of this play is biblical. The incidents mentioned in this drama are based upon 13, 14 and 16 chapters of the book of Judges. Some other sources which form the basis of this play are Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews, a French tragedy, and History of Samson by Quarles. The play narrates the story of the deception of Samson, the Hebrew hero, by his Philistine wife Delilah, and the indignities to which he was subjected to by his enemies. Samson is endowed with indomitable courage and great physical strength by God. The secret of his powers lay in his looks. Delilah persuaded Samson to reveal to her the secret of his strength, and Samson, overpowered by the pleading of his sweet-tongued wife, confided in her the secret of his strength. Delilah is a faithless woman, and she deceives him by passing on the secret to her own people. The result was that Samson was defeated and taken prisoner at Gaza by the Philistines. The result was that Samson was defeated and taken prisoner at Gaza by the Philistines. Samson Agonistes represents Samson as a prisoner at Gaza, working as a laborer in a common workhouse. Here his father Manoah comes to console him and is prepared to work his ransom. The giant Harappa comes to insult him. Delilah also visits him to win his pardon. At last, Samson gets ready to give an exhibition of his former strength to the Philistine lords gathered in a well decorated hall to celebrate the festival of Dagon, their god. Samson shows his strength and shakes the massive pillars of the hall. The roof collapses on the heads of all sitting beneath. Samson is also crushed to death, but he has the satisfaction of destroying Philistines. After looking into the life of John Milton and after doing a brief study of his major works, we can say that he was the child of both Renaissance and Reformation. His childhood was spent at a time when the forces of the Renaissance were prevalent in the society. His youth witnessed the culmination of Puritanism, and his old age saw the Restoration period. In John Milton's poetry, there is a fusion of qualities represented by the Renaissance and the Reformation. He is both a belated Elizabethan of the Renaissance and a passionate disciple of the Reformation. In his works, both the qualities that were dear to Elizabethans and the qualities which are dear to Puritans are present. The Elizabethans and the Renaissance traces are visible in his early works such as El Allegro and El Penseroso. On the other hand, the Puritan and Reformation elements begin to assert in Comus, Lycidas and Paradise Lost, and he becomes a complete Puritan in Paradise Regained and Samson Agonistes. In other words, John Milton connects two diverse and opposite ages, that is the Elizabethan age and the Puritan age, and metaphysical age also touches him briefly. His location in his own age and his contribution to literature makes him one of the most important figures of all times. So, dear friends, after looking into the life and works of John Milton and his contribution to the field of literature makes him one of the most important poet of all the ages. Thank you.